And we continue at 2:06 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show, broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios, where you're about 30 minutes away from every golf course imaginable in the Coachella Valley. Mr. Randy Wang's at the sports desk in Culver City.
John, I'm sitting here all day trying to wrap my brain around why people are motivated to steal fire hydrants in Norwalk, and I think I've figured out what it is.
The drugs can make them zombie.
I think you hit the nail on the head. 800-222-KABC is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is a pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He was a candidate for the Republican nomination for the presidency until late last week when he decided to drop out of the race and throw his support behind former President Donald Trump. You can get him online at LarryElder.com and follow him on Twitter at Larry Elder. The sage from South Central, Larry Elder. Welcome.
John, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by. So last week you made a very big decision.
I did. I was having a private meeting with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago, and I told him that I was going to drop out and that I was going to endorse him. And I wanted him to talk about a couple of things that, in my opinion, he hasn't been talking about at all. Number one, the biggest social problem in the country is the epidemic of fatherlessness. You and I have talked about this before. 70% of black kids enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother, up from 25% back in 1965. Now 25% of white kids do. And the numbers are clear. You're more likely to drop out, more likely to commit crime, more likely to end up in jail. The number one cause of preventable death for a black male 19 years and younger is homicide. Number one cause of preventable death for a 19-year-old white male and under is accidents, like car accidents or drownings or overdoses. And this is because of the lack of fathers in the house. The Center for Disease Control, John, says a black male aged 10 to 43 is, wait for it, 13 times more likely to be murdered than a white male in the same demo. Unless people are prepared to say that black people are just genetically inclined to commit more crime, you have to ask yourself, if it isn't the lack of fathers in the home, please tell me what it is. I told this to President Trump. I also said that while our side supports school choice, we have not effectively made the argument about why it is so important K through 12 in urban America, where, just to pick one city, Baltimore, 13 public high schools in Baltimore, all located in the inner city, 0% of kids can do math at grade level. Meanwhile, the party elites, as I explain in my new book, As Goes California, people like Gavin Newsom and Joe Biden and Barack Obama have their own kids in private school, while we are being prevented from having that same kind of choice. So I told him all of this, and he said, okay, this is when are you going to make the announcement? I said, I really haven't decided. Next couple of days. He says, why don't we go downstairs and make it right now? He's having a big fundraiser. 1,200 of the wealthiest conservatives in America were there. And we walk downstairs and go on the stage, and Donald Trump does his town hall, and I stand there, and then about maybe 40 minutes into the speech, he says, and Larry Elder's here, and he has a big announcement to make. Larry, come on down over here. So I go over, and I spoke almost 10 minutes, and then I got off the stage. But it was almost a surreal experience talking to all these people and making this decision. So I feel good about the race, John, as you know. It was strangled in the crib because they did not allow me on the first debate. I met all the debate criteria. I got shafted. I'm trying to use a polite word. And as a result, I couldn't make the second debate, let alone the next one coming up here. I think it's on the 7th. So I got realistic, and I decided that I was going to end it and support the guy that I believe is going to get the nomination, and I believe will also be able to beat Joe Biden. And again, if Biden is not the nominee, it will be Kamala Harris. Trust me.
You know, Larry, I'm a big believer in the law of unintended consequences when it relates to politics. And I believe that the RNC did not want you on that stage because you are a professional broadcaster. You are someone who knows how to communicate. You've communicated with not only the public, but you communicated with juries and in different capacities throughout your career as a broadcaster, a writer, a litigator. And you would have excelled on that debate stage. And I don't think that they wanted a professional broadcaster up there with a bunch of politicians because you would have dominated. That is a world that you're very familiar with. Okay, fine. Rig the system so Larry can't participate in any of the debates. Well, Vivek gets up there and essentially fills the void that I believe you probably would have been the one up there that would be dominating the discussion and dominating the topics in these debates. And they tried to stop you from doing it. And lo and behold, guess what? They kept you off the stage. But Vivek is doing exactly what they don't want to be done on that stage.
Exactly. And not only that, John, at the last debate, you might remember, Vivek brought up the, quote, epidemic of fatherlessness. That's the expression that he used. That's the expression I've been using ever since I got into the race on the 20th of April. I've seen him speak many times in Iowa, New Hampshire, John. He has never, ever mentioned it. In fact, before the second debate, he pulled me to the side and said, Larry, if you don't make this debate, will you support me? And I said, I can't promise that, but I can tell you this. I'll be inclined to at least listen if I don't make that debate, and you can raise the issue of fatherlessness and say, my good friend Larry Elder has been talking about this for decades. It's about time we do something about it. He said, I will do that. He got up there and he mentioned the epidemic of fatherlessness, but left out the Larry Elder part. Oh, well, crunch time. You only can get in so much, I guess.
You know what they say, Larry? Sometimes when the Lord giveth, the Lord also taketh away.
That's right. But more importantly, of course, the issue is being discussed. There's a columnist with the New York Times named Nicholas Kristof, a longtime liberal column. He wrote a long piece a couple of weeks ago about the epidemic of fatherlessness and chastised fellow liberals for ignoring the issue and said to ignore the issue was counterproductive. His word, not mine. There's no way he would have written that had I not been bringing this issue up. So as far as I'm concerned, the issue is at least being discussed, and now we need to do something about it.
Larry, what we've seen play out over time, not just with the Biden administration right now, but with the Trump administration before Biden, with the Obama administration, it's very common in American politics. If you run in the primary and you lose, but your eventual nominee ends up winning the presidency, they frequently find roles for their former rivals in their campaign, in their administration. Certainly you have a warm relationship with former President Donald Trump, who is the front runner in every poll that I've seen, not just in the primary, but in the general election. If President Trump were to ask you to be a campaign surrogate for him as he campaigns for the presidency or offers you a role in the administration, is that something you would consider doing?
As to the first, being a surrogate on TV or on town halls and things like that, yes. As for being in the cabinet, I'll have to decide that at the time. Awfully hard for me to turn my back on something if I feel I can help the country. But the cabinet position I would really like, John, is Secretary of Education. And I would tell Mr. Trump, give me 6 months, and I'll burn the place down. we don't need it. We don't need to have a Department of Education. Ronald Reagan in 1980 campaigned to eliminate it. When he left, it was bigger than before. So that's the job that I would want. But I'd only do it for 6 months. By the way, when we had this conversation, I can reveal this. I don't think he'll be upset about that. We talked almost a half hour. Trump, my campaign manager, my campaign lawyer, just the four of us. And I asked him this. I said, why do you suppose no one's been able to come up with a nickname for you that stuck? You got Cricket Ted, you got Lion Hillary, you got Low Energy Jeb Bush. Why has no one come up with a name for you? And he said, it's a good question. I never really thought about that. I said, you haven't thought about this? You've been insulting people, and you never thought maybe somebody would come up with a nickname for you? He said, no. He said, that's an interesting question. I'll give it some thought. John, let me ask you, why do you suppose there's been, come on, there's plenty of things people could say. Why is there no nickname for this guy?
Because one of the things that Trump does when he's campaigning out on the stump, and I believe he learned this coming from New York, participating in those tablets, because the newspapers in New York very different than the newspapers in any other city. Maybe London is comparable, but when you have Page Six and you have the New York Daily News and you have Cindy Adams and all of those people that do the gossip columns, he lived in those pages. And to exist in those gossip rags, you have to be able to distill things down to a very easy name or a joke or a quip or something along those lines. And he's essentially an insult comic. When he's on stage and he's ripping people apart, he doesn't come at it typically from a place of anger. He's having fun with it. The crowd is having fun with it. And part of the problem, I think, with a lot of his critics is they come at him from a place of anger. And it's never a good look when you come at something from a place of anger. You have a nasty look on your face. You have a bad disposition. You're not having fun with it. If you're not having fun with it, it's hard for the audience to have fun with it. He has fun with it, and he comes at it from a good-natured place. Now, maybe the people that he's making fun of don't think that he's coming at it from that point of view. But what he does, and it's very Shakespearean in its nature, Shakespeare never made his bad guys or villains truly evil people. He made them the buffoons. It's John Falstaff, and they were the comedic figures in all of his plays. And people like the villains because they got to laugh at them because they were cartoonish. And that's one of the things that Trump does very well. He turns his villains into cartoonish buffoons, and when they're cartoonish buffoons, the sky is the limit. You can have as much fun with them as you want.
And the man has so much stamina and energy. I mentioned I'm on the stage with him when he's talking to all these donors, and I'm standing there for about 40 minutes, John. My feet are hurting, my knee is hurting, my lower back is hurting. This guy is just rocking and rolling and laughing, and to watch him up close and personal deliver this thing, and he's got notes, but he's not paying attention to the notes. It was really amazing watching him. And he's having a blast. You're absolutely right. He's having an absolute blast. And he doesn't seem to be worn down by the indictment at all.
Do you think the media is covering this primary the right way? And I say that because, and I've had this conversation with friends, where I say, I think the framing is all wrong. We're framing this as if it's an open seat. But when you're a former president and you're running for the presidency again, it's not really an open seat. It's almost like an incumbent is running, and you have to treat it that way because they have all the power of an incumbent. They're just not formally an actual incumbent.
I think that's an interesting analysis, but my bigger problem, John, is the way the media is maligning our side as being election deniers. All Donald Trump did on January 6th was make the same argument that Democrats made after they lost the 2000 election when they tried not to qualify Florida. They argued that the count should not have been stopped and that the vice president had the power to reject the certification of Florida. They did the same thing in 2004 after they lost re-election. 30 House members and Senator Barbara Boxer argued that they had the right not to accept Ohio because they claimed that the Diebold voting machine had been tampered with. Fast forward 2016, they challenged 9 states as opposed to the 6 that Donald Trump challenged. Nobody called them election deniers. Nobody said they were undermining the foundation of our republic. And for crying out loud, their lawyers weren't facing disbarment. Now, this is really quite serious. CNN has a politics editor named Chris Cillizza, and he produced some polls showing 76% of Republicans believe that there was widespread voter fraud following 2020. You can't have a country when half the country believes blah, 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 blah. Well, Jay Johnson, Obama's DHS secretary, testified under oath that while the Russians tried, they failed to change a single vote tally. However, a YouGov poll found 66% of Democrats believe the Russians, quote, changed vote tallies, close quote, in 2016 to elect Donald Trump. He also said, I have no idea whether or not the Russian interference, primarily taking out a bunch of Facebook ads, had any effect on the election. NYU did a study and said the effect was barely measurable. Yet 78% of Democrats, according to Gallup, believe that the Russian interference, quote, altered the outcome of the election and affected public opinion, end of quote. So a greater percentage of those guys believe 2016 was stolen than we feel that way about 2020, but nobody calls them election deniers. Hillary spent the whole Trump presidency referring to him as illegitimate and saying the election was stolen. Jimmy Carter, a former president, said he believed the Russians put Donald Trump there. Can you imagine a former president suggesting that maybe, just maybe, an election was not on the up and up?
Larry, I want to play some sound for you and get your reaction to it. Over the weekend, Kamala Harris did a sit-down with 60 Minutes, and one of the questions that came up was, what is going to happen if Joe is not the Democratic nominee? Let's listen to Kamala's reaction and then get your reaction. This is Cut 9.
We were talking to some Democratic donors, and they have told us that should something befall President Biden and he is not able to run, that there would be a free-for-all for who would run as president. You are in the spot that would be unnatural for you to step up, but we're hearing from donors that they would not naturally fall into line. Why is that?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to engage in that hypothetical because Joe Biden is very much alive and running for re-election. So
but you do know. I mean, that is a concern, and a legitimate concern, I would say.
I hear from a lot of different people, a lot of different things. But let me just tell you, I'm focused on the job. I truly am. Our democracy is on the line, Bill. And I frankly, in my head, do not have time for parlor games when we have a president who is running for re-election.
Larry, she never answers the question directly.
No. Well, what did you expect her to say? I hope he drops dead so I can become the candidate. And I told you this before, John. If he can't fog up a mirror, she's going to be the candidate. She ran for president. She ran for DA of San Francisco. She got elected. She ran for Attorney General here in California. She got elected. She ran for U.S. Senator in California, got elected, and she was on the ticket with Joe Biden and got elected. She's never lost an election when she's been on the ticket. And so there's no reason for me to think that she thinks I'm so incompetent. I'm such an airhead. I've got to cackle for a laugh. I'm going to step aside and have somebody else come in. And remember, the most loyal part of the Democrat base are black voters, and black females are even more loyal. And there was a poll in the LA Times that put her popularity among blacks at 70%. It wasn't broken down by gender, but I assure you she's even more popular among black female voters. And their first primary is South Carolina, and 60% of the Democrat voters in that primary are black. And they love Kamala Harris. And if she is perceived as having been drop-kicked for some white dude like Gavin Newsom, black female voters won't vote. They won't vote Republican, don't get me wrong, but they just won't vote at all, thereby guaranteeing whoever our nominee is on our side, he or she will win. They can't afford to do that. So she's sitting pretty, and she knows that.
Well, Gavin Newsom certainly looks like a candidate. He went to Israel.
What?
He's over in China right now playing basketball with little Chinese kids like he's Bill Laimbeer, knocking them all down, going for the hoop.
You know, white governors can't jump. You know that. Look, why do you suppose he hasn't announced already? He hasn't announced because he knows what I just now told you. Black females will be livid if Kamala Harris is not the nominee. Remember when James Clyburn endorsed Joe Biden, he got a promise from Biden that his first nominee for the Supreme Court would be a black female. His running mate is a black female. And Gavin Newsom said he would appoint a black female to take over if Dianne Feinstein doesn't finish out her term, and did just that. And now we're going to drop kick a black female in favor of some white dude like Mayor Pete or Gavin Newsom? I don't think so, John. The Identity Party has painted itself into a corner.
Last question before you go. Do you think Joe makes it to November of next year?
Again, I don't think it matters because if he doesn't make it, it will be Kamala Harris. By the way, Gavin Newsom has said nothing critical about anything that Joe Biden has done. The economy, people feel that they're worse off than they were 2 years ago. As I explained in my book, As Goes California, he didn't even criticize him when he pulled out of Afghanistan. In fact, he praised it. So they're stuck with his policies, no matter who the person is. But I don't believe that Joe Biden is going to make it. I don't think he's got the juice to make it to November. But again, if he doesn't, it'll be Kamala Harris, and we're still in the same predicament that we are.
The book is As Goes California, My Mission to Rescue the Golden State and Save the Nation, available online at Amazon.com. If you want to follow Larry on Twitter, you can do so at Larry Elder. And if you want to find him online, you can get him at LarryElder.com. Larry Elder, thanks so much for stopping by. Always a pleasure.
John, do you think I should have called the book White Governors Can't Jump?
Well, he didn't jump. He just ran him over like bowling pins.
Well, as I said, he couldn't jump.
He didn't have to if you just run right through him.
Thanks for having me on, John. I appreciate it. God bless.
Thanks for coming on. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
That's right. Will writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com about Barbara Ferrer's Halloween warning that you might get rabies if you pet a bat. It's fitting that our rabid fate doctor would know the dangers of getting bitten by a bat. After all, her master, who turned into her one, is one of the undead frequents that frequents the friendly skies as a bat himself.
I have tech issues.
Getting creative today in the email bag. And if you want to listen to the podcast edition of this program, Randy, that's easy to do.
That's right. Go to KABC.com, click on podcasts, go to the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe, or even easier than that, just search for the KABC app in the Apple App Store or the Android Store. Easiest way to listen live to this station whenever we're broadcasted from noon to 3 anywhere around the world with the online stream, and download podcasts of this show that you can listen to outside of the hours from noon to 3 whenever you want. It's so easy to do. Anyone could figure out how to do it. Barbara Ferrer, you know how to download the app, right?
I have no idea.
Okay, she can't do it, but I bet you could.
And Randy, coming up in November, we're going on the road.
That's right. Mark your calendars, save the date. Friday, November 17th from noon to 3, John and I will be broadcasting live at the brand new Gelson's West LA at West Edge on the corner of Olympic and Bundy. That market has the grand opening this Wednesday. I can't wait to get down there to myself and check out the new digs. We're going to be there hanging out at the wine bar, having a great time, celebrating the lead-in to the holidays. It is Friday, November 17th from noon to 3 at the brand new Gelson's West LA at West Edge. Come see us.
Well, we've told you that in the city of Oakland, the 911 system has not been working, well, pretty much at all. Sometimes it's working, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you get the call picked up right away. Sometimes you have to wait a long time. Even if you get someone on the phone, maybe they send someone to your house, maybe they don't.
What happens is, while you're calling 911, the basketball court is on fire. By the time they actually pick up...
Oh, my God, they melted the basketball court.
So the city of Oakland decided that they were going to get creative. And they were going to get creative by trying to find alternate means for you to contact the police so you don't call the 911 system, because that never works.
911 doesn't work. 311 doesn't work. So how about you slide into our DMs? Oakland Police Department created an Instagram and an X account called Oakland Auto Berg. Oakland Auto Berg. And the idea was, if you witness a car burglary, send us a direct message and we'll do something about it. And this program lasted about 8 hours.
Not even 24 hours.
Now, why did they close the program so quickly? They won't say. Does it have anything to do with that the same day they launched this program, Pamela Price got her car broken into?
Quite frankly.
I'm not sure. But for more on this nonsense that is Oakland, we go to a report from KPIX.
Oakland Police Department has shut down a social media strategy meant to help fight auto burglaries. The pilot program, which lasted less than a day, allowed people to direct message police on X and Instagram.
Okay, what were people sending them?
Oh, if it's anything like when we had the ability to take in text messages, it was all pornographic pictures.
I can't find any of the actual messages about car break-ins because all I see on here are eggplants. Wait, those aren't eggplants.
No, and I don't even think it was professional pornography. I think our listeners were sending us pictures of their genitals.
If they see someone breaking into a car. And while some question the decision to end the program, OPD says the decision to shut it down was always the plan. Max Darrow explains.
On Friday, Oakland police created social media accounts called Oakland Autoberg, where people could DM or direct message the police about auto burglaries in process. This was a pilot program that was originally supposed to run through the weekend, but the accounts were deactivated by Friday night.
The day it started, the day it ended.
What must they have received that made it so horrific they had to pull the plug after 8 hours?
Auto burglaries are a problem in Oakland. District 5 Councilman Noel Gallo knows this firsthand.
My car's been broken in 3 times, one in front of City Hall and 2 over by Jack London Square attending business meetings.
Well, Councilman Gallo, I bet you are pleased to hear that Sheng Tao feels your pain.
You may be frightened, and I know how you feel.
Well, she's still looking for that magic wand.
Not a day goes by where I don't wish I could just wave a magic wand and silence the gunfire.
Oakland auto burglaries are up 36% compared to last year.
I wonder what changed. Could it be a district attorney that doesn't want to do her job and a mayor that for some reason thought it was a great idea to fire the police chief on day one with no way to replace him?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Those might be dots that connect.
OPD launched the social media pilot program so they could test out an additional way for community members to report auto burglaries. The move came as a surprise to Gallo.
I was, watching the news on TV, and that's the first time I had heard that was going to be implemented here in Oakland.
But the program was shorter-lived than many people expected. In a Facebook post on Friday around noon, OPD wrote the program would run through the weekend. But by Friday night, the Oakland Autoburg accounts notified followers they were done and deactivating the accounts.
What was the point of that? They had a whole press conference for this thing, too, just to blow it all up in 6 hours.
How much do you think they paid a PR firm to put this together? Because you can't just put something like this together. You have to publicize it. You have to come up with graphics and fonts, websites. You have to buy time on the local television and radio stations. And then they shut it down after 8 hours.
People on social media expressed frustration with the duration of the pilot program. But in a statement shared with CBS News Bay Area on Sunday, OPD told us the auto burglary social media reporting pilot was always intended to be a limited test. The test
limited to less than half a day?
No. 8 hours is definitely limited, but they had planned on this lasting longer than that.
Well, here's what happened. They realized, okay, we want to have this test program, and we're going to have a quota for a certain number of car break-ins that we're going to get messages for. Maybe they got so many messages in the first hour, they said, test complete. We know.
And there's nothing they can do about it.
No.
The test concluded as...
Because even if you can direct message them, chances are they don't have someone that they can send out to help you in a timely manner.
The test concluded as scheduled, and the accounts were deactivated as planned. This account will be reactivated ahead of our next test. Thank you to all who participated. The Oakland Police Department will review the results of these tests and evaluate the next steps.
Now back to your regularly scheduled car break-ins.
Gallo says the intent behind the program is good.
I hope the new technology reporting system works. But at the end of the day, it's going to take the enforcement to follow through on the call.
And that, he says, is lacking.
Right now, what I'm getting from my neighbors, my residents here with the frustration, not only do they do not get a response from 911, they don't get a response from the 311 system that we have.
And when they try to reach out on Instagram, they shut down the account.
Well, after 8 hours.
We asked OPD how many messages they received over the course of the pilot program, but we're told that OPD could not provide that information at this time.
I'm so perplexed. I have to know what went wrong.
At some point, someone's going to spill the beans.
Oakland, on the other hand, my God, you got to be nuts to live there.
The White House just released video of Grampy Joe handing out candy to trick-or-treaters at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Grampy Joe is standing outside the White House wearing a ball cap, and he doesn't have the motor skills to get the candy into the kids' hands. He is dropping the candy and spilling it all over the floor.
Oh, no.
And then we went to sleep.
I would say the odds are now south of 50% he's alive November of next year. Can't walk upstairs, can't walk downstairs, can't put candy in a pumpkin.
Not a joke.
It's 2:53. This is Talk Radio 790 KABC.